What separates a bench warmer making league minimum from a Hall of Famer, making $40 million per year? The answer isn't what you think. There are exactly 7 distinct levels of MLB players, and the brutal truth is that natural talent only gets you through the door. Everything after that depends on staying healthy, performing under pressure, and turning potential into actual production. Some players spend entire careers stuck at level 1, while others transcend the sport itself. The hierarchy is more ruthless than you realize. Level 1. Minor league prospects and bench warmers. Meet the guys who change uniforms more than they change their batting average. These are the organizational filler players who live in baseball limbo between AAA and the majors. They exist in a constant state of maybe, packed bags, sitting by the door waiting for the phone call that might come today or might not come at all. These are baseball's human Swiss Army knives, except they're only sharp enough to cut through minor league dreams and September call-ups. Andrew Velazquez perfectly represents this level. He has played for 6 different teams in 5 years, bouncing between AAA and the majors like a pinball with a glove. The Yankees called him up in 2021, then sent him back down. The Angels picked him up, used him for a few months, then moved on. The Orioles gave him a shot, and the pattern repeated. His career batting average hovers around .230, which is exactly the kind of production that keeps you employed but never secure. The cruel math here is simple. Teams need 40-man roster spots filled, but only 26 guys can actually play at any given time. That leaves 14 players in organizational purgatory, close enough to taste the big leagues but far enough away that they might never get a real chance to prove themselves. These spots get filled by players who can play multiple positions and won't complain about constant movement between levels. Garrett, Hampson, and Abraham Toro represents the modern version of this level. Both are multi-position players who get called up when someone gets hurt or when rosters expand in September. Hampson has played second base, center field, and shortstop for 3 different teams since 2019. Toro can handle first base, second base, third base, and the outfield, making him valuable enough to trade, but not valuable enough to build around. These players master the art of being just good enough to not get released but never quite good enough to stick around permanently. They hit .240 with occasional power, field their positions without making highlight reel plays, and run the bases without getting thrown out too often. It's perfectly adequate baseball, which is both their strength and their curse. The running joke is that their September call-ups feel like participation trophies. When rosters expand from 26 to 28 players, teams bring up guys like this to get their first taste of big league clubhouses and stadiums. Everyone gets a moment to feel like they made it, even though most will be back in AAA before October ends. Teams love these guys because they're cheap insurance policies. When your starting shortstop pulls his hamstring, you need someone who can fill in for 2 weeks without embarrassing himself. When your backup outfielder gets traded, you need a body who knows the organization and can step in immediately. These players provide that flexibility at a fraction of the cost of established major leaguers. Fans struggle to buy their jerseys since they might be gone next month. Why spend $150 on a jersey for someone who might be playing for a different team by the time it arrives in the mail? The constant movement makes it impossible to develop any real attachment to these players. The harsh truth is that Level 1 players are paid to be available, not necessarily to be great. That availability is worth about $750,000 per year in today's market. They get paid more than most people will ever make, but in baseball terms, they're living paycheck to paycheck. This level proves that just making it to the majors doesn't mean you've made it in the majors. Being there and staying there are completely different challenges. Level 2. Failed top prospects. Nothing breaks baseball fans' hearts quite like a top prospect who had all the tools except the most important one, staying healthy and productive. These are the players who were supposed to change franchises, sell tickets, and lead teams to championships. Instead, they became expensive reminders that potential doesn't always translate into performance. Mark Prior was supposed to be the Cubs' ace for the next decade. When Chicago drafted him second overall in 2001, scouts couldn't stop talking about his perfect delivery and devastating stuff that made hitters look foolish. His mechanics were textbook. His fastball sat in the mid-90s with pinpoint control. His curveball dropped off tables. Everything about him screamed future Hall of Famer. In 2003, Pryor went 18-6 with a 2.43 ERA and looked exactly like what the Cubs thought they were getting. He struck out 245 batters in just 211 innings. He helped lead Chicago to within 5 outs of the World Series. At 22 years old, he appeared to be entering his prime with unlimited upside ahead of him. Then his shoulder decided to disagree with that assessment. The contrast here is brutal. Pryor's peak was so high that his fall felt like watching a skyscraper collapse in slow motion. Shoulder problems started in 2004. Elbow issues followed in 2005. By 2006, he was done as an effective major league pitcher at age 25. The Cubs had invested millions in a player who gave them essentially 2 good seasons before his body betrayed him. Matt Bush represents a different kind of failure entirely. The Padres made him the first overall pick in the 2004 draft, giving him a $3,150,000 signing bonus. Bush had all the physical tools: a cannon arm, decent speed, and the kind of raw athleticism that made scouts dream about his ceiling. The problem was everything else about his life outside baseball. Bush spent more time in actual prison than in the majors for his first decade as a professional. Multiple arrests for assault, DUI incidents, and other legal troubles derailed what should have been a steady progression through the minor leagues. By the time he finally made his MLB debut in 2016, he was 30 years old and had wasted over a decade of his career. Jesus Montero might be the most painful example of all. The Yankees developed him into one of baseball's top catching prospects, with a smooth swing and legitimate power potential. In 2012, they traded him to Seattle as part of a package for Michael Pineda, who went on to win a Cy Young Award. Somehow, Montero still lost that deal. Montero never developed the defensive skills to catch regularly in the majors. His bat, which was supposed to be his calling card, produced a career .254 average with minimal power. He bounced around multiple organizations before washing out of professional baseball entirely. The Yankees got solid production from Pineda. Seattle got nothing lasting from their investment in Montero. These players had all the physical gifts but lacked the durability, mental approach, or off-field stability to turn potential into production. The expectations versus reality gap at this level creates some of baseball's most expensive disappointments. Teams invest millions in dreams that never materialize, leaving front offices gun-shy about similar prospects for years afterward. Being a can't-miss prospect just means you'll miss in more spectacular and expensive ways than everyone else. The difference between hype and health often determines whether a player becomes a legend or a cautionary tale told in front offices for decades. Level 3. Journeyman utility players. Some players never find a permanent home on the field, but they make themselves so useful everywhere that teams can't live without them. These are the players who bounce around the diamond like ping-pong balls but somehow always land somewhere useful. They turn their lack of a defined position into their greatest asset, becoming too valuable to bench precisely because they can play anywhere. Ben Zobrist spent his career being the answer to every manager's positional problems. He played second base, shortstop, third base, left field, center field, right field, and first base during his time in the majors. The only position he never tried was catcher, and that was probably just because nobody asked him to strap on the gear. His managers loved having him on the roster because he solved multiple problems with one roster spot. The beauty of Level 3 is that these players turn what might seem like a weakness into their greatest strength. Instead of mastering one position, they become good enough at 6 or 7 positions to be useful anywhere. Zobrist hit .266 over his career with decent power and solid defense wherever he played. He was never the best second baseman in baseball or the best outfielder, but he was good enough at both that teams could plug him in anywhere and feel confident. Zobrist became a World Series MVP in 2016, despite never being the best player at any single position. The Cubs used him at second base, left field, and right field during their championship run. He hit .357 in the World Series and delivered clutch hits when Chicago needed them most. This proved that versatility beats specialization sometimes, especially when October baseball requires managers to make constant adjustments. Chris Taylor and Kike Hernandez represent the modern version of this level. Taylor has played second base, shortstop, third base, and all three outfield positions for the Dodgers. Hernandez bounces between second base, center field, and shortstop, depending on what the team needs on any given night. Both players have become essential pieces for managers who need flexibility in their lineups. The running gag with utility players is that fans struggle to buy their jerseys because you never know what number they'll wear next season. These players change teams frequently, and when they do stay with one organization, they often switch numbers based on who else joins the roster. Spending $150 on a jersey becomes a risky investment when the player might be wearing different colors next April. These players master the art of being good enough at everything to be great at being flexible. This skill keeps them employed for years longer than specialists who can only play one position. When teams need to make roster moves or deal with injuries, utility players provide immediate solutions without requiring major adjustments to the lineup. Teams love utility players because they solve roster construction problems that would otherwise require multiple players to address. Instead of carrying separate bench players for infield and outfield situations, managers can use one utility player to cover both areas. The players themselves often sacrifice individual awards for team success, since playing multiple positions means they rarely accumulate enough games at any single spot to be considered for Gold Gloves or All-Star selections. Level 3 players prove that sometimes being really good at being pretty good everywhere is more valuable than being great at one thing. The contrast here is that these players often have longer, more stable careers than more talented specialists who can only play one position. Level 4. Solid everyday starters. Level 4 players anchor lineups without making headlines. They're the reliable workhorses who show up every day and do their job without drama. These are the guys who make $15 million per year instead of $35 million. Not because they can't play, but because they can't quite carry a franchise on their backs. Matt Chapman represents this level perfectly. He's a 4-time Gold Glove winner who plays third base like he has a magnetic glove. His defense is so good that he won the Wilson Defensive Player of the Year award in 2018 and took home Platinum Glove awards in both 2018 and 2019. When ground balls come his way, they turn into outs. When line drives scream toward the hot corner, Chapman makes plays that other third basemen can't even attempt. The cruel irony of Level 4 is that consistency is their calling card, except when it comes to the one thing that would make them superstars: consistent offensive production. Chapman's bat tells the whole story of this level. In 2019, he showed his ceiling with 36 home runs and 91 RBIs. He looked like a complete player who could anchor both sides of the diamond for years to come. Then, reality reminded everyone why he's not quite elite. Chapman struck out 147 times that same season in just 583 at-bats. His 2021 campaign was even more extreme. He led the American League in strikeouts with 200 while batting just .210. He took more pitches per plate appearance than any other MLB batter at 4.29, which sounds patient until you realize he had the lowest line drive percentage in the league at 14.6%. All that waiting around resulted in either walks or strikeouts, with very little solid contact in between. Injuries also remind everyone why Chapman stays at Level 4 instead of climbing higher. Hip tendonitis cut his 2020 season short and required surgery. He batted .232 with 54 strikeouts in just 142 at-bats before his body gave out. The combination of offensive inconsistency and health concerns keeps him valuable but not irreplaceable. Whit Merrifield spent years being the most consistent player that casual fans never talked about. He could steal 40 bases, hit 300, and play multiple positions without generating any buzz on sports talk radio. His production was steady, year after year, but steady doesn't create highlights or sell jerseys. Brandon Belt carved out a decade-long career being pretty good at first base for the Giants. In San Francisco, that counted as star power because the Giants needed someone reliable to man first base every day. Belt wasn't going to hit 50 home runs or drive in 130 runs, but he wasn't going to embarrass himself either. For a franchise that values consistency, pretty good was good enough. These players live in the gap between being good enough to start every day, but not quite good enough to carry a franchise. The expectations at this level are manageable. Be solid, be available, and don't be the reason your team loses games. Teams can build around level 4 players, but they can't build championship teams with only level 4 players. Level 4 proves that being reliably above average is actually a rare and valuable skill in a sport where failure happens 70% of the time. The contrast between steady production and superstar potential defines this level. They're the foundation that allows superstars to shine while providing the consistency that teams need over 162 games. Level 5, Perennial All-Stars. Level 5 players carry championship expectations everywhere they go, and the pressure of being elite performers can be both a blessing and a curse. These are the guys who make $25 to $35 million per year and are expected to single-handedly turn franchises around. The weight of those expectations follows them to every at-bat, every pitch, and every interview. Mookie Betts was so good that the Red Sox traded him away rather than pay him what he was worth. Boston knew they had one of the best players in baseball, but they also knew they couldn't afford to keep him long-term. So they shipped him to the Dodgers before the 2020 season, along with David Price, in exchange for Alex Verdugo, Jeter Downs, and Connor Wong. The Red Sox got solid players back, but they gave up a superstar. The trade immediately proved how painful it was for Boston. Betts helped the Dodgers win the 2020 World Series in his first season with the team. He hit .292 in the playoffs and provided the kind of clutch hitting that championship teams need. The Red Sox watched their former star celebrate a title while they finished with a losing record. The brutal math of this level is that being great isn't enough. You have to be great consistently, stay healthy, and perform when it matters most. Regular season success means nothing without playoff success. A .300 average doesn't matter if you hit .200 in October. Jacob deGrom has the second lowest career ERA of any starting pitcher in the live ball era among qualified starters. His 2.50 career ERA puts him ahead of Hall of Famers and Cy Young winners. In 2018, he led the majors with just 0.41 home runs allowed per 9 innings, which shows how dominant he was at preventing runs. He won back-to-back Cy Young Awards in 2018 and 2019, leading the National League in strikeouts both years. The contrast here is painful. deGrom's individual brilliance was so extreme that it highlighted how bad his supporting cast was for most of his career. He regularly threw 7 shutout innings only to watch his team lose 2-1 because they couldn't score runs for him. His teams went 67-75 in games he started from 2018 to 2021, despite him posting a 2.05 ERA during that stretch. Fernando Tatis Jr. represents the modern version of this level. He's baseball's most exciting player when he's actually on the field. His combination of power, speed, and defensive ability makes him must-watch television. He signed a 14-year, $340 million contract extension with the Padres before his 23rd birthday, which shows how much teams value elite young talent. The problem is that Tatis has trouble staying available. He was suspended for 80 games in 2022 for PED use, missing most of the season when his team needed him most. He's also dealt with multiple injuries, including shoulder problems that required surgery. His exciting style of play sometimes leads to unnecessary risks, like diving for routine ground balls. These players live under a microscope where every slump becomes a crisis and every injury becomes a referendum on their training methods. Sports talk radio dedicates entire shows to analyzing their plate approach or their workout routine. The expectations at level 5 are championship or bust, which means even great seasons can feel like disappointments without rings. Level 5 proves that elite talent comes with elite pressure, and sometimes the weight of expectations can crush even the most gifted players. The difference between being a great player and being a great player on a great team often determines how these careers are remembered. Level 6, Hall of Fame Legends. Level 6, players didn't just dominate their era, they changed how the game was played and remembered, becoming the measuring stick for excellence. These are the Hall of Fame legends who transformed baseball from just a sport into something bigger. They didn't just put up great numbers, they redefined what great numbers could look like. Derek Jeter's clutch gene became as legendary as his off-field gift basket deliveries, proving that timing matters as much as talent. The Yankees captain made his reputation by showing up when the lights were brightest and the pressure was highest. Regular season stats tell one story, but October baseball tells another. Jeter understood this better than anyone else in his generation. The magic of Hall of Fame players is that they performed their best when the stakes were highest, turning October baseball into personal highlight reels. Jeter holds the record for most hits in MLB postseason history with 200, which sounds impressive until you realize he also scored 111 runs in the playoffs. These numbers came from 158 postseason games, which means he was getting on base and coming around to score at a rate that other players could never match when it mattered most. His game-saving catch in the 2001 ALDS against Oakland became the kind of play that defined his entire career. Running full speed toward the first baseline, Jeter caught an overthrow and flipped it backhanded to home plate to tag out Jeremy Giambi. The play required perfect timing, perfect positioning, and perfect execution under maximum pressure. Most players make that play once in their career if they're lucky. Jeter made plays like that so often they stopped being surprising. Randy Johnson was simultaneously baseball's most dominant and most terrifying pitcher. Batters faced him like they were entering a horror movie, knowing that something bad was probably going to happen to them over the next few minutes. His 6 feet 10 inches frame created problems for hitters before he even started his windup. When a pitcher is that tall, the ball comes from a completely different angle than what batters are used to seeing. Johnson's 100-mile-per-hour fastball created a psychological advantage before he even released the ball, making hitters uncomfortable in the box. The combination of his height and his velocity meant that fastballs appeared to rise as they approached the plate. Hitters had to adjust their timing and their swing plane just to make contact. Most of them failed. Johnson finished his career with 4,875 strikeouts, which was the second most in MLB history when he retired. His 5 Cy Young Awards tell the story of sustained excellence over more than a decade. Johnson wasn't just dominant for a few seasons. He was dominant from his early 30s into his early 40s, which is almost impossible for power pitchers to achieve. Frank Thomas earned the Big Hurt nickname both for his hitting and for what he did to opposing pitchers' ERAs and confidence levels. His .301 career batting average combined with 521 home runs and a .419 on-base percentage made him a nightmare for managers trying to figure out how to pitch to him. Thomas could turn around any fastball and work any count into his favor. These players revolutionized their positions and became the template that future generations tried to copy but rarely matched. The contrast at this level is between great players and transformational players. Level 6 guys changed the conversation about what was possible. Hall of Fame careers aren't just about accumulating stats. They're about defining excellence for an entire generation. Level 7. Transcendent icons. Level 7 players transcended baseball and became cultural icons whose influence extended far beyond the diamond into American folklore. These weren't just great athletes. They became symbols of American culture itself, with stories that got passed down from parents to children who might never watch a single baseball game. Their impact reached into movies, books, and conversations that had nothing to do with sports. Babe Ruth didn't just hit home runs. He pointed where he was going to hit them, becoming baseball's first trash talker and greatest showman rolled into one. The famous called shot in the 1932 World Series against the Cubs became the kind of legend that defined his entire career. Ruth gestured towards center field, then hit the next pitch exactly where he pointed. Whether it actually happened the way people remember doesn't matter. The story became bigger than the facts. Ruth literally changed the sport from a strategy-based game to a power-based spectacle, single-handedly ushering in the modern era of baseball entertainment. Before Ruth arrived, baseball was stuck in the dead ball era. Games were slow, strategic, and boring for most fans. Home runs were rare events that happened maybe once or twice per game. Ruth hit 54 home runs in 1920, which was more than most entire teams hit that season. He transformed baseball into something completely different. His arrival marked a seismic shift that made the game more exciting and attracted a wider audience. Ruth became baseball's first true superstar, changing how fans thought about what was possible on a baseball field. He made power hitting the main attraction instead of just one part of the game. Willie Mays made impossible catches look routine while maintaining a humble, joyful approach that made him beloved across racial and regional lines. His signature basket catch, where he caught fly balls with his glove near his waist instead of above his head, became iconic. Most outfielders caught balls the traditional way because it was safer and more reliable. Mays caught them his own way because he could make it work every time. The Say Hey Kid represented everything pure about baseball. His incredible talent combined with infectious enthusiasm and respect for the game made him appeal to fans who might normally hate his team. Mays played with a smile that was genuine, not forced for the cameras. He loved playing baseball, and that love showed up in every at-bat and every defensive play. Mickey Mantle hit balls so far that stadiums had to invent new ways to measure distance, creating a mythology around his power that still exists today. His tape measure home runs became legendary not just for how far they traveled, but for the sheer impossibility of hitting a baseball that hard. Mantle's power was so extreme that fans would show up just to see if he could hit one over the stadium roof. These players became larger than the sport itself, their names recognized by people who never watched a single game. The contrast at level 7 is between being a great baseball player and being a cultural force that shaped American identity. Ruth, Mays, and Mantle weren't just athletes. They were characters in the American story. Level 7 proves that true transcendence happens when athletic greatness meets perfect timing and larger-than-life personality. The difference between Hall of Fame careers and legendary status often comes down to becoming a story that gets passed down through generations. MLB's 7-level hierarchy reveals that natural talent only gets you through the door. Everything after depends on consistency, clutch performance, and staying healthy long enough to build a legacy. Sometimes the difference between levels comes down to whether you're remembered for what you did or haunted by what you could have done. In baseball, potential is just expensive disappointment waiting to happen. The brutal beauty of this hierarchy is that it proves greatness isn't just about ability. It's about turning that ability into production when it matters most, for long enough to matter forever.